Hello, my name is Michael Byers, and I hold the Canada Research Chair in Global Politics and International Law at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. And together with my colleague Aaron Boley, who holds the Canada Research Chair in Planetary Astronomy at the University of British Columbia, I've co-authored an article on space mining that has just appeared in Science. And in this policy forum article, we tell the story of how the United States is currently engaged in a major diplomatic effort to secure acceptance of its preferred interpretation of the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, with its preferred interpretation being that commercial space mining is permitted and that it can take place subject to national regulation only. In other words, it does not require an as yet unnegotiated multilateral governance regime, that individual countries are sufficient in terms of regulating commercial space mining, that this is allowed under the Outer Space Treaty because the US preferred interpretation of that treaty gives room for such activities to take place. We engage in a bit of a legal analysis. We talk about how Article 2 of the Outer Space Treaty prohibits, quote, national appropriation of the moon and other celestial bodies, and how the US thinks that prohibition applies only to assertions of territorial title and therefore not to the extraction of minerals and then their sale. In fact, the administrator of NASA, Jim Bridenstine, has argued that this is similar to catching fish on the high seas, where the fish in the ocean belong to no one until a fish is caught, and at that point it belongs to the person who catches it. So in an area beyond national jurisdiction, something that belongs to no one can be transformed into an object that can be bought and sold by the act of extraction. Now, we don't take a position on that debate except to point out that unregulated high seas fisheries often results in overexploitation and a collapse of stocks, and that is why around the world countries have come together in multilateral agreements, in bilateral agreements to create regional fisheries organizations and generally to set quotas and sometimes moratoria to protect high seas fish stocks. That the fact that it's beyond national jurisdiction doesn't mean that the world will allow a free-for-all. Now, the other thing we do in this article, apart from telling the story of the U.S. effort to create this widespread acceptance of its preferred interpretation, to avoid the need for a new multilateral negotiation and the possibility of multilateral governments, apart from telling that story of the U.S. strategy, we also identify that there are risks associated with the U.S. strategy. One of the big ones here is that if you have national regulation only, you risk creating a race to the bottom. That essentially different countries might compete to attract space mining companies to incorporate within them by offering reduced regulatory standards and lax enforcement. And in the most extreme case, you'd actually see the emergence of flag of convenience states in the space domain, similar to what we have on the world's oceans, with roughly 70% of the world's cargo ships registered in Panama and Liberia because of relaxed regulations and lax enforcement, and with that, not surprisingly, a less successful safety regime. More accidents as a result of a flag of convenience race to the bottom situation. So we point that out. We also point out that there's a risk to scientific opportunities, that some of the places that space mining companies would want to go could be of extreme scientific importance. Asteroids, for instance, often contain some of the oldest materials in the solar system. Many of them also contain amino acids and therefore possibly scientific evidence as to the origins of life. Really important opportunities for science that could be destroyed by mining companies going and extracting materials before the science can be done. And we also talk about the fact that mining on asteroids will create debris, mining in a low gravity, low escape velocity environment, and that this debris, because it will come from near Earth asteroids that in many cases are on Earth crossing orbits, could end up destroying satellites in Earth orbit, and therefore creating a great deal of damage to vital services here on Earth. We also talk about how, in a worst case scenario, mining an asteroid could even change its trajectory onto an Earth impact trajectory and create a crisis situation simply by removing mass and thus altering the orbit of the asteroid. So the need for very careful regulation and a lot of science in advance of any mining activity, the kind of safety regime that is most likely to come from multilateral governance rather than purely national governance. Those are the sorts of things that we're talking about. And to conclude the article, we're simply saying to the international community, look, pay attention to this. The United States has been moving very quickly. An executive order back in April, NASA announcing its plans for a series of bilateral Artemis Accords in May, and then in September, NASA actually requesting proposals from the private sector to establish a precedent by a private company going to the moon, extracting regolith from the surface, and then selling it to NASA to help create subsequent practice to the Outer Space Treaty in support of the U.S. preferred interpretation. Again, an interpretation that would say that national regulators only are necessary, that commercial space mining is allowed, and that we don't need to have a new multilateral negotiation leading to an international governance regime. That's our article. It's very timely, and we think it's important. I hope you'll read it. Thank you.